I just realized this video is about a 23-year-old man getting mad at a children's card game.
Yep, this is going to be the video that makes me lose my mind. Max Potion! Hey, what is up guys? Epic Pokemon TCG here, and today guys, I'm going to be doing a video over the top 5 decks that I hate the most in the Pokemon TCG since I started playing. These decks drive me crazy, and I get extremely angry when I go against them or if I've gone against them. Every time never fails, so let's get into the list. Alright, starting at number 5, it's going to be Groudon. Now this is a deck that I've only faced and expanded because really that's the only time you can face this deck. But Primal Groudon, oh my god, I hate this deck. Mostly because if you can't one-shot it, you don't win. That deck pretty much just focuses around Groudon sitting on the bench, and because of its trait, you can't Lysander it or nothing. And so basically, it's sitting there getting powered up, and you're dealing with cards like Wobbuffet, Robo Substitute, and there's cards in there that heal it, like Max Potion sometimes, Super Potion, and this thing, which switch your active with one of your bench Pokemon. If you do, heal 30 from it, and then pretty much from there, it just sits on the bench and heals like crazy. And at the start of the game, what they do is they run Tropical Beach, usually a copy of 4, and what they do is they'll just have Wobbuffet up there, slow you down because you can't access cards like Shaman, Jirachi, or anything like that, or any of the other abilities that might help you progress throughout the game or help you out. And so you're slowed down. Meanwhile, they're charging up one freaking Primal Groudon, and if they get 2, you're done. The only way to beat this deck really is to knock the crap out of it, have the potential to one-shot it, or play Vespiquen or some other type of grass attacker. But yeah, basically, I faced this deck one time, and that was enough to drive me crazy, and I've seen it played, and I hate it. Jesus, this thing is just so annoying, and ugh, hate it. Alright, starting at number 4, we have Fairy Toolbox. Now, Fairy Toolbox is a deck that isn't particularly like the best thing in the world, and it never really was. It was just like an annoying deck, but still it was good. You know, it was a very highly competitive deck. It wasn't particularly like the best, like it was tier 1 a few times, but still overall not the greatest thing in the world. And I'm referring back to whenever cards like Prism Energy, Rainbow Energy were both in the format. And so this card pretty much condensed all the things that I hate into one deck. You got cards like Aegislash, you have Max Potion, you have AZ later on in the format, and then some of them even ran freaking Enhanced Hammer for some reason. I don't know why. I faced this deck so much throughout my Pokemon career that it's just like... pretty much this deck, it's based around, if you hit me, you better one-shot me, because your damage is going bye-bye. Bye. See you later. And every time I play this deck, actually let me back up a little bit. Any type of deck that requires moving energy around and then max potioning, because anytime I play this deck, I always go up against it when I have a deck that can't necessarily one-shot unless I have a huge setup. I think the only time I've really ever had a comfortable matchup against it was when I absolutely exploded on my turn 1 with an Evital with like a bunch of energy on it that pretty much could one-shot their attackers. Because most of the time, those type of decks take 2 to 3 energy for their main attackers. And of course, the deck is slower, and so, they have to Geomancy and go through that whole big process. But basically, if they get set up, good luck. Because they have just a huge range of attackers, and really they're set up for any type of situation. Now, most of the time against me, it's like anything that I do, like 150 damage, no, Max Potion. 160 damage? No, Max Potion. Even 30 damage because they know next turn I'm going to knock it out, Max Potion. I go nuts. Absolutely nuts. And I think the most ridiculous time that I was going against this guy, I want to say it was in a city championship, and he was playing this deck. Basically from there, you probably saw a really weird cut. I heard a strange noise from the other room, so I closed my door in the fear of getting murdered. Anyway, so basically I was going against this guy in a city championship, and this was like when Fairy wasn't like particularly like the best thing in the format. It kind of died off a little bit, But of course, I face it, and I'm not ready for this deck. So what does he do? This dude ran AZ and Max Potion, and this was the most annoying thing in the whole entire world. Because this dude had this huge turn, because I was giving it to him, man. I was just smacking this dude around, and he had a turn where he Max Potion 2 Pokemon, and then AZ the third one, and I just kind of sat there and I wanted to flip the table. Like, anytime I go against this deck, it's Max Potion, Max Potion, Max Potion! Then the Aegislash. The Aegislash. It's always the Aegislash. Never fails. I'll be going against a deck that's extremely reliant on double colorless energy. Aegislash. I'm sitting there pulling my hair out. What hair I have left. Yeah. I hate Fairy Toolbox. Always have, always will. Alright, number 3 is Valgar. Now, Gengar is one of my favorite cards in the entire Pokemon TCG, probably my number 1 favorite. But this deck is probably one of the biggest annoyances I think I've ever gone against. This deck is just, like, its whole strategy is probably the dumbest thing in the world. Now, in case you're wondering what this deck exactly does, there is a Vileplume that does exactly what our Vileplume now does in the format, which is it stops all trainers, or back then it was trainers, now it's item cards or whatever. But then you pair it up with Gengar from Stormfront. Now, if you guys want to know exactly what this does, it has an attack called Shadow Room. You put 3 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. If that Pokemon has any Poke Powers, you put 6 on instead. This was very good back then because a lot of players played Azelf and Uxie, which had 70 HP and had a Poke Power. So pretty much you pair this up with Crobat G, and you would knock stuff out. But it really wasn't in there for Shadow Room. Instead, it was for Poltergeist. Now, what Poltergeist did was 30 times the number of trainer, supporter, and stadium cards in your opponent's hand. So you're kind of looking at the strategy already. Now, this deck played cards like Spiritomb from Arceus with Darkness Grace, which was a free attack, and what that did was you search your deck for one Pokemon that evolved from one of your Pokemon on your bench, and then you put a damage counter on Spiritomb, and it had a body, which was Vileplumes. Neither player can play any trainers. That was it. So pretty much the lock started as soon as the game, started up. So basically from there, you can't play your item, or you can't play your trainer cards or nothing. And back then they weren't really that reliant, but still it was pretty annoying because you still had a pretty hefty amount in your deck, and there wasn't like retarded draw power back then, except for like I think Claydol. Actually, I want to say Claydol probably came in after, or no, before Vileplume came out. I can't remember exactly. It's been so long. But like pretty much what that deck did was you can't play anything, and then like Gengar would snipe you, and it would use Poltergeist, do a bunch of damage, and you couldn't set up or anything. And on top of that, if you did manage to knock out a Gengar, God forbid you would make the biggest mistake in the world. Why? Because it has Feigning Spell. Feigning Spell, once during your opponent's turn, if Gengar will be knocked out by damage from an attack, you may flip a coin. If hence the defending Pokemon is knocked out. Now, as much as I love Gengar and it being my favorite card of all time, I'm going to say it now, it is my favorite card of all time. I hate this deck. It was just, and it was everywhere. Like, God, it was everywhere. Like, I mean, you've seen this deck all the time. It was very popular in my area, and it was like, it was stupidly consistent because what they did was they just stocked it up with a bunch of supporter cards. They played like Professor Elms, which was like a card that did exactly what Spiritomb did. It was a supporter, so you just evolve. So this deck was really good about getting stuff out immediately, and on top of that, it played Broken Time Space. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, here it is, Broken Time Space. This is Forest the Giant Plants for anything back then. That's what it was. You didn't have to wait. You didn't have to sit there for a turn. No, you have Ghastly, Haunter, Gengar, Oddish, Gloom, Vileplume. So it wasn't like it was hard to get that stuff out, and then you're kind of sitting there just going, alright, I can't do anything. Every time I played against this deck, I would get my ass kicked. Never failed. Nope. I lost every time. I honestly think I have about an O and double digit number against this deck. After like my Nats run, I went into a Battle Roads and faced Valgar. Nope. Alright, before I get into the top two, I'm going to go ahead and throw out an honorable mention here, and that is Sable Donk / Sable Lock, because the deck could do both. What that deck was all about was using Sableye. If you guys can see here, this is the Sableye from Stormfront, which has a Pokebody called Overeager, and basically what that is, if you start with Sableye, you went first. That was it. If your opponent didn't have a Sableye, and you did, no matter what, regardless of the coin flip, you went first. And also, it has an attack called Impersonate, which was for free. And you search your deck for a supporter card and discard it, shuffle your deck afterward, and then the effect of that card is this attack. Yeah, it was that bad. Damn good. And then on top of that, this was the attack that it did. This was the one that the deck was just focused around. Called Overconfident. It has a base of 10, which you're like, that's not bad. But if the defending Pokemon has fewer remaining HP than Sableye, this attack's damage base is 40. Now you're like, okay, you got cards in the format now that make that look like an absolute pipsqueak because it only has like 70 HP, right? Yeah, it only has like, what, 70 HP? No, 60 HP. But, back then, there was cards like Unknown, and it had had a Pokepower called Dark. What it did was you play it down, you search your deck for a Dark Energy card. Now, it didn't specify, so you can grab a special Dark Energy. Also, there was Crobat G. Pretty much, you play it down on your bench, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon, and do 10 damage to it. And there was a card called Expert Belt, which is kind of like Finding Fury Belt now, but it did like an extra 20, I think it was 20 extra HP or something like that. But basically, it added extra HP, and your attacks did more damage. And on top of that, pretty much you can play Pokemon Collector, which was you get three basic Pokemon out of your deck, put them in your hand, so they would grab like a double Crobat and something else, probably an Unknown, and then they would just get a free knockout. Because back then, there was no big EXs. There was no big, like, 180 HP Pokemon. Everything back then was pretty much like 60, 70, 80, 90, 110, sometimes whatever. There was low HP Pokemon, so this was very easy to pull off. And on top of that, if they didn't donk you, there was so many disruption cards in this deck that it was ridiculous. They had I had one set of Battle Roads, and then they did an emergency rotation because of this deck. Like there was a Nationals that was like a rotation, like the rotation happened early because of how stupidly dominant this deck was. And it later on, I think it even kind of I want to blame this for the reason of why you can't attack on your first turn. I really do, because I know there was other cards. This was like later on, but this deck was a huge problem, and it was like they called this Battle Roads the Donk Fest Roads. It was stupid. But all right, guys, my top two. Number 2 is Excelgor Anything. This card. I hate it. I hate this card. Like, I feel bad saying that to a Pokemon card because I love Pokemon so much. But this thing, oh my god. This thing is like... I can't even put into words how... This card, I don't know, man. It has deck and cover. You guys know what it does. And there are so many different Excelgor variants that it's ridiculous. You know, there was Excelgor Gothitelle, there's Excelgor Wobbuffet, there's Excelgor Ninjask, etc. It goes on and go on. And there's Excelgor Flygon. There's just so many different decks. And the reason why I hate this deck is because I don't like cards that, you do one attack and you just can't do anything. Now, that's why I'm not particularly fond of Jolteon. Now, I'm not talking about Seismitoad or nothing like that. Seismitoad, I don't mind Seismitoad. I don't. Okay, I definitely don't. 100% I don't mind Seismitoad. All it does is stop you from using trainers. Back then, with Vileplume and stuff, that's different. Whereas like now, or like whenever Seismitoad was big, we had cards like Zero Sick and such. So that one I didn't mind. This, however, base of 50 for a DCE too. For a freaking DCE. The defending Pokemon is paralyzed and poisoned. So basically, if you're not ready for this, you're done. You're screwed. Even if you're ready for this. The only thing back then that could get you out of it was Keldeo. Because usually they played it with Gothitelle or, some other card that was like, well, if you get out of this, then, oh well, they're ready for it. I hate this deck to no end. I call this the no skill deck. I really do. I'm sorry. If you played this deck and you had success with this deck or something like that, and I offended you just now, I apologize. I just personally can't stand this stupid thing. And especially with Gothitelle Excelgor, like having to play like double Keldeo at a Nationals because if you didn't, you were screwed. Even then, you didn't have a 100% guarantee because most of the time they just Lysander, or back then was Catcher in back then. I want to say it was. But basically, well, it didn't matter, because they would bring it up, and their deck would be built to handle any type of situation that, would come up where we were trying to counter it. The only time that it was like kind of ish okay was when you were playing Aegis Slash. Even then, it wasn't a 100% guaranteed thing, and so I hate it. This card is like one of the things like where you just can't do anything, and it's extremely boring to go against it. Seismitoad was okay. Because eventually I just kind of learned how to play around it, and I learned how to go against Seismitoad, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. This stupid thing, however, you can't really prepare for it. It doesn't matter, I don't know. I would get kind of ticked off whenever people are like, oh man, yeah, I did really good this tournament. I'm playing Excelgor. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So you're playing a deck where pretty much you do one attack and your opponent can't do anything to respond to you. Good job. And especially the year that my deck got stolen at Nationals, which was Plasma pre-10s, by the way, so everything in this deck was like $20 and up. Yippee. This got stolen, and I think like finals for Nationals that year was Excelgor versus Plasma. And so like basically anytime, players who are playing Excelgor are talking about this deck, it's like that grapefruit video that I'm not going to show because I'm pretty sure that's not appropriate. But if you've seen that video, that's pretty much what it was like. And I had to sit there and listen to my friends go on and freaking on and freaking on and freaking on and freaking on about Excelgor while I'm sitting there going, oh great, yeah, it's beating the living crap out of the deck that got stolen and ruined my whole trip. Thanks, guys. So that's pretty much what that's about. So yeah, Excelgor, definite number 2. Can't stand that deck. 100% hate it. And I'm really glad that it's gone and I don't have to deal with it in Expanded. Even in Expanded, it's not that popular, but at the time it was extremely popular. I hated going against it, and I'm glad that it's gone. Alright, my number 1 deck. What is the deck that I hate the most? You guys are sitting there probably wondering, going, why didn't you say Night March? Why haven't you said Seismitoad yet? Where's all these decks? I don't mind those decks. I don't mind them at all. Because instead of complaining about them and going on and throwing a fit about them, yes, they have caused me some issues in the past where I've gotten a little frustrated. But overall, you have to adapt to the format and get used to it. These, however, I can never find myself to be able to adapt to these, but the number 1 deck isn't because it annoyed me. It isn't because I just couldn't beat it or something like that. It was because it ruined my best tournament run of all time. Number 1 is Luxchomp. If you guys don't know what this deck is, it is Garchomp C level X and Luxray GL level X. Now, I'm going to go over these cards here a little bit, kind of run you around the strategy of the deck. So back then, all the stuff that I was talking about earlier when I was talking about Sableye, Pokemon didn't have that high of HP. And a lot of decks played a card called Claydol with Cosmic Power. See if I can find it real quick. They played this card which has 80 HP, and Garchomp C had an attack called Dragon Rush. Now what that did was you discard you discard 2 energy, so you could discard a DCE, and there was a card called Energy Gain, and what that did was it took off a colorless cost, kind of like Dimension Valley for Psychic Pokemon, and it was a tool that you attached to it, and basically they just discarded DC and they could snipe anything for 80 damage. So a lot of times they would snipe your Garchomp, or they would like snipe a main attacker that you were trying to power up, like as a basic or a stage 1 or something like that. And it was just really annoying. Also, whenever Garchomp C went down onto the field, it healed all of your SP Pokemon. So it was basically like a max potion for free for everything. And back then there was a card called Poketurn, and what that did was you just picked up like an SP Pokemon and everything attached to it and just went back to your hand. And so that was very annoying. And there was cards like Crobat G I've mentioned a couple times in this video, so that way you could like hit stuff for like 10 and then finish it off if it had 90 HP. And then there was the main attacker called Luxray, and what that did was it had a Lysander for a Pokepower, and it just did like 60 or 70 damage. And back then that was like huge. This deck was like the best deck in format, like hands down for a while. Like this was the guaranteed best deck because it really didn't have that bad of a matchup against a lot of different things. And even if it did, it could still play around it and win. Now, this is the deck right here, exactly card for card, that I had my best ever tournament run with. I've kept it all these years and I'm never taking it apart because it's just a symbol of, a time that I really love this game. I still love this game, don't get me wrong. It's been frustrating here lately. But still, like this is my favorite deck of all time, card for card, and I'll never be able to replicate my success with the that I have with this deck. And basically, I went through nationals. Day one, I was 6-1, only losing to Luxtromp. Day two, I was like 6-3. Lost two more times, unfortunately, to Luxtromp. All three of which were extremely close games. I got in the top cut and I faced another Luxtromp. I beat that, and then the final round, I lost to Luxtromp. Now, the reason why I hate this deck is because I'm still mad, and I always will be mad, that it ruined my whole like tournament run. And that's pretty much the reason why. Because like during that tournament, as a new player, I was experiencing something I've never experienced before. People were talking about me. People were talking about my deck. There was like going around all over the place, people talking about this Gengar deck that was up at top tables that really wasn't losing. And that was me. People were talking about me, and it was so awesome, And this deck ruined my tournament run. Ow, I'm good. People like were talking about me, and this deck ruined it, And if you guys haven't seen the video where I talk about my tournament run and everything, is I did like a full story on it. Basically, my opponent scooped, thinking that he lost whenever I drew an extra card by accident. And he picked up everything, but I was a cool sport about it because he had me next turn. So I told him, I said, "Hey man, I picked up another card by accident. You had me, you had me beat. Good game, you win." And that's the kind of person I like to be during games. I don't like to be the a-hole and stuff like that. But like the sole reason why I hate this deck, isn't because I couldn't beat it or because it was unstoppable, because it kind of was, but mostly because of the fact that the time that like I was the best at this game, that was the deck that was like the bane to my existence, and that like forever I have that cemented, It's like kind of like a competitive friendly like hatred. The other four decks I hate with a burning passion. This one, it's a weird relationship. I did play it and I had some minor success with the deck as well, but overall like it's just always that feeling that I have. I'm just like, God, I hate that deck because it ruined me. So. We're top 5 list, and of course the honorable mention, but I don't know. That's just how I feel personally throughout this game. And if I said anything about a deck that you might have played or had some success with, or a deck you liked or anything like that, I don't mean any disrespect to you personally. I just don't like the deck, and I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm just saying that you're an. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's the top 5 decks I just don't like in this game. And if you enjoyed the video and made it this far, make sure to like it and let me know down below what the top 5 decks you hate of all time are, because I would love to hear it. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. And thank you so much for watching. Take care, guys. And this is Epic Pokemon TCG signing out.